Today is Saturday, July 15th. We know news headlines can often be depressing. Statistics about teens' mental health in America right now are concerning, and post-pandemic burnout seems to be everywhere. All of that on top of a multitude of stressors and setbacks we each individually deal with on a daily or weekly basis. So we want to take some time to talk about what we can do about it. Today, we are taking a break from any specific news topic to talk about building resilience. Our guest is Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe. She's a multi-award-winning education and psychology instructor who specializes in resiliency and navigating stress and change. She's the author of the book, Calm Within the Storm, A Pathway to Everyday Resiliency. And her new book is Stress Wisely, How to Be Well in an Unwell World. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe, thank you so much for coming on the Newsworthy.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So first, I'd love to hear how you define resiliency, or what it means to be a resilient person.
Resiliency is this idea about the behaviors that we do that allow us to show up after we've experienced challenges, stressors, or those hard parts in our life. So what's really important to me, Erica, is it's not something you're born with. It's like, what do we choose to do, and how do we show up after we've gone through a challenging season?
And so what do you think most people misunderstand about stress, or on the flip side, resiliency?
Stress is inherent to the human condition. Like, there's absolutely no way to get through life without stress. And it's actually how our biology is built for us to be able to show up, to respond, to take in information, and to be able to make decisions. So our nervous system is designed to operate with stress. So the question, I think, comes not how do we get rid of stress, but better, how do we make stress our ally, so that way we can be resilient, we can show up through all of it.
And I guess to that point, how do you like to find that balance of feeling the feelings and understanding that stress is inherent and it's going to happen versus falling into a victim mentality or having a really pessimistic nature?
Yeah. So I think we all actually have what we call in our research, we call it the emotional home. And so the emotional home is the feeling or the state that we spend most of our time in, or we'll show up in it because it's familiar. So for some people, it could even be anger, and they could be having the best day ever, seeing the most beautiful vistas in all of the world, and still find a reason to get angry. Or perhaps your emotional home might be worry, and it doesn't matter what happens, you're just going to find a way to get yourself in a really worried place. So when we think about learning how to work with our stress, it's actually learning how to almost reset what we're familiar with in terms of how we show up in the fullness of our lives, so we're not as reactive versus being in a place where we're able to respond.
So walk us through some of the top things we can do to reset, to make sure our emotional home is what we want it to be, while also accepting that we're going to have bad days and a variety of feelings.
The research shows, for example, people who get outside more often, they're naturally more inclined to re-regulate those nervous systems. It can cool it off simply by spending time outdoors. We know being in community, being around the right people, when we're living value aligned, all of those things are going to help us feel safe and steady and grounded.
What's your advice for someone who maybe feels overwhelmed by too many ideas, and how do I even get started? How should they get started? What is the first best next step?
I think the best next right step is to think about our morning routines. Create these habits or these routines or even rituals in the morning that really puts you in that right mindset, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is, so that way you are the most prepared to show up for your day. Because I think what happens in our culture, we often try to cope with our stress after, right? We've had a very full day, and then in the evening we might feel depleted, and then we try to kind of self-care ourselves back to well, versus coping ahead of time. So we can do that by having a solid morning routine, take the thinking out of it, so it uses discipline, that this is just what we do in the mornings, set yourself up for success so you can be effective, and then you show up boldly into your day.
And I'll speak for parents of young kids that maybe it's not immediately in the morning, but after they go to some sort of childcare or they take a nap, you can fit in whatever that thing is that makes you feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, I can share with you, as someone with 3 teenagers, I recall when they were little, I remember for me, and I was a single parent at the time, they would actually like, as soon as I would wake up, they'd be out in the backyard, still in their PJs. I would have my morning coffee and I would let them run around in their PJs for just 5 minutes in the backyard. And I remember some people saying, oh, well, they haven't had breakfast yet, or, oh, they haven't got ready for their day. And I said, yes, and we're going to get to those things, but I'm literally going to let them outside, get fresh air, be in nature, play, and then we're going to start doing some of the tasks. And I think sometimes we lose the art of play, and it doesn't always have to be as structured.
There was a survey from the American Psychological Association last year that found a quarter of U.S. adults reported feeling stressed out every day to the point where they said it was difficult to even function. Do you think there's something more happening here, or have we always kind of been this stressed out and it's all relative to what you think is going on?
We know that people are feeling depleted and we know people are feeling overwhelmed. And I think what's happening is that we're building these lives that are actually outside the scope of what's manageable. And often when we look at it from like that zoom out approach and kind of look at it from the big picture, we realize we are stressing over so many things that don't even really warrant us getting that much of a reaction. And I'll give you an example. There was research that we conducted where we actually were working with young children to stay on the theme of little ones. We were working with children and we asked the children, when do you feel the most loved by your parent or guardian or supporter? And the number one response we heard back, Erica, is when my parent plays with me. So it wasn't a perfect birthday party. It wasn't the perfect room. It wasn't being involved in all of these extracurriculars, like where parents and supporters are spreading themselves so thin. It was literally when parents played. It's one of those ideas about learning how to make what matters most matter most, not getting tied up into all that noise about what we ought to be doing and should be doing, and just really be present with the people in our lives, because all of a sudden we can realize we're carrying a lot of things that are weighing us down that really don't make a big difference at the end of the day.
So how, again, should someone get started with setting those priorities?
I think what really helps is knowing what your values are. Like, what are the things that you want to be known for as a parent or as a person or as a partner, and then showing up and behaving in such a way. I remember when my oldest was in grade 9, he had asked me to come to a basketball tournament, and there was a big game after school, Erica, and he's like, I need you to be there, Mama. So of course I was going to be there. But then as I was leaving work, I got distracted and people had questions for me. And people were like, oh, Dr. Robyne, just one more thing. By the time I got there, Erica, it was the fourth quarter. And Hunter came up to me when it was over. And he asked me, he said, Mama, I'm glad you're here. Question though, have you ever been late for a keynote? Have you ever been late to teach? Have you ever been late for a flight? And in that moment, I said, well, no, buddy, those things are important. I can't be late for those things. And as soon as I said it, Erica, I knew I was out of alignment. And he looked at me and I could see the hurt in his eyes. And he said, Mom, you always tell me family comes first, but we only ever get the leftovers of you. And I'll tell you, my children have always been my greatest teachers. So again, it's that radical clarity of, do I want to be the person who shows up? Yeah. So then I have to make decisions to say yes to the things that are going to let me show up to be that type of parent, and no to say no to the things that are going to keep me farther away from living how I want to be as a parent. And
it sounds like that doesn't mean not going to work, but then setting those boundaries for where and how you want to show up.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I think boundaries, everyone's talking about boundaries right now, which is amazing. I prefer, and what works for me, I think a bit more readily, is thinking about my non-negotiables, because my boundaries really have to be flexible. Like, there are some days I do need to, check email in the evenings. There are some days I do work in the evenings or weekends when I'm traveling. So for me, it's these non-negotiables. So what are non-negotiables in our house? We have a tech-free zone in the kitchen. When people are in the kitchen, they're not on their phones. We need to be able to be nimble and adapt to ebb and flow with our lives. But then we have to have certain kind of rules or those non-negotiables that we don't back down on.
Have you ever said something like, well, when this happens, then I'll be able to do that? Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe explains why that is such a myth and why our own wellness may not be as far away as you might think. That part of the conversation and more coming up next. But first, a quick break for our sponsors. AG1 is a daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. and it has become part of my everyday. I drink it each morning. I actually first gave AG1 a try because I too had heard about it on other podcasts and was really intrigued. So I tried it, and I reached out to partner with them because I find it really beneficial. So here we are. AG1 makes me feel that I'm covering my nutritional bases with a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food-sourced nutrients. It supports my energy, focus, immune system, gut health, and more. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. AG1 has helped millions of mornings begin on a healthier foundation. And you're getting all of this for a lot less money than if you took all these individual supplements. Each serving of AG1 costs less than $3 a day. So if you're looking for a simpler, effective investment to your health, try AG1 and get 5 free AG1 travel packs and a free 1-year supply of vitamin D with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/newsworthy. That's drinkag1.com/newsworthy. Check it out. And thanks to our other sponsor, HelloFresh. If you're feeling stuck in a recipe rut and want to switch things up this summer, check out HelloFresh. It's America's #1 meal kit. You get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Perhaps it's the closest we can get to having it all: free time and fresh, tasty food. Since they take care of the meal planning and delivering all the ingredients you need, it is so much easier. And the other bonus, pre-portioned ingredients help cut down on food waste. And they help make cooking feel doable, even enjoyable, instead of just a chore. Plus, they have so many options, including a seasonal fresh and fit summer menu, or what I've been liking since I'm usually pretty tight on time, the fast and fresh options that are ready in just about 15 minutes. Chicken and tomato grain bowls with garlicky white sauce and lemon is just one example. And a reminder, Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh, so no matter which one you choose, there is something for everyone. Go to HelloFresh.com/newsworthy50 and use code newsworthy50 for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/newsworthy50 and use that code newsworthy50 for 50% off plus free shipping. Okay, now back to our conversation. Why are some of these tactics, like resetting your nervous system and, deciding what are your non-negotiables and understanding your values, how does that ultimately help you be well?
Our wellness is not as far away as a lot of us think it is. It's the decisions that we make. And when we start to see those little wins on a daily basis, that consistency compounds, and that's where people really get to a place of deep wellness, because regardless of what comes their way, they know that they have practices and habits and strategies that are going to help them show up in a way that actually works for them so they can be steady and grounded come what may.
Do you find that, you pick up the momentum and go, or is it kind of always a 2 steps forward, 1 step back situation where it's not linear?
Even knowing where can we take some of these little shortcuts so we don't have to make this always this big onerous decision versus like these are just things that we do and we start to embed it within our identity. Any of us could be like, I'm a person who is when I wake up in the morning, I get outside. Because what the research says is that helps to re-regulate a nervous system and people are healthy and they have more vitality the earlier they can get outside in the course of a day, right? So you're just a person who chooses to get up and get outside right away, right? So again, it's cobbling together some of those practices so then that way it just becomes part of our identity versus a 21-day program or a 90-day program.
What's your advice for someone who's surrounded by another person who is seemingly stressed out all the time and it's either impacting your relationship or impacting your mood and nervous system?
Ask them, do you need comfort or do you need a solution? And I'll give you the example. Our daughter came home a wee while ago and she was all keyed up and I could just see she was carrying the weight of the world. She was so stressed out. And I just said, Ave, do you need do you need me to comfort you or do you want a solution? And she's like, Mama, I need you to sit down with me right now. And I need you to hate math as much as I do. And I'm like, okay, I got you. So we sat down and we commiserated about everything that's wrong with grade 11 math and how it hurts. And then I did actually ask her after she started to re-regulate, what happened today that got you so upset at school? And she said the teacher in my English class had asked, what was the last book that you read that made you cry? And Ava said calculus. And so she was so embarrassed that math was casting the shadow over her experience. And the difference in that situation is when she said to me, I want you to hate math with me. And I jumped into solution mode and said, we're going to get you a tutor. We're going to put in extra hours. We're going to figure this out. She wouldn't have felt seen and heard. And when people are really in their feelings and experiencing distress, they're either looking for comfort or solutions. And the quicker we can match that, so we're aligned with what they're looking for, it can actually help the people around us feel seen and feel better.
Before we end, I kind of want to do a roundup of a couple other top advice for handling various situations, if we can. So first, workplace anxiety and also dealing with the so-called Sunday scaries.
The antidote or the solution there is that we actually need friends in our jobs. We actually need an ally and a colleague, because when we have that sense that we're not in it alone, the Sunday scaries don't impact us the same way.
For parents and other caregivers, what about the stress of even just wondering if you're doing a good enough job?
If you're a parent or a caregiver and you're wondering if you're doing a good enough job, you are already probably doing too much. So if you're even curious about like, wow, am I showing up to really meet the needs of my child and my family and my community? You are likely already probably doing too much, and you can just take the pressure off.
What about things that seem outside of our control, whether that be, the political divisions or even something in your own life that you can't control and it stresses you out?
Yeah. So I think what's really important there is we have to make the invisible, the worry, the thing that we're talking about, we have to make it visible. So that's why like journaling or like writing things down, and my journaling literally is writing on Post-it notes where it's like, okay, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what I notice I'm feeling about this topic. And I recognize it's outside of my control. And as soon as we make the invisible, that thought, visible by writing it down, we actually know it takes away that power, that feeling of helplessness.
Anything else that we haven't addressed that you think is important to note, or even just a final piece of advice or takeaway for our audience?
I think the big one in terms of in the book, kind of to sum up the big idea, is to address this myth that so many of us have. First, this idea that our wellness is far away. It's not. It's literally what's your next right choice. And the second is the myth known as when, then. And that is like, when I get this done, then I'm going to take care of myself. When my children are older, then I'm going to not worry as much. When my partner does this, then I'm going to be happy. The reality is the when, then trap keeps us trapped, and it precludes us from our own joy and happiness versus learning how to enjoy the messy middle and trusting that it's all going to work out.
Well, thank you to Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe for sharing her insights. Again, her new book is called Stress Wisely: How to Be Well in an Unwell World. As always, we'll be back soon with our regular 10-minute daily news roundups. We give you the fast, fair, fun news you need each weekday morning to help you stay in the know. So let's chat again Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.